Hey folks, this is Vince with Dad's Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to take a very brief look at the game Garden Dice. Now this game is for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, and the average play time is about 60 minutes. In this game, players will be planting seeds and harvesting crops in order to earn victory points. Let's just take a quick look at the components and see how the game is played. Now, as far as the components go, you've got a number of things going on here, but I'll do my best just to briefly overview each item. Along the bottom are 5 seed tiles, and they range 1 through 5. On the reverse side of these seed tiles are Veggie tiles. Basically, the vegetables correspond with the seed on the other side. Carrot seed, carrot. Tomato seed, tomato. And so on and so forth. This rock tile over here is only used in a 2-player game. Basically, this allows players to section off certain parts of the game board, which is not shown here. Next to the rock token is this sun token. This is sort of a special token that players will receive at the beginning of the game, and it allows them to re-roll the dice on their turn if they happen to roll unfavorably. Next to that, we have this 2-sided token. One side has a rabbit on it, while the other side has a bird on it. And players will be able to place these tokens on the board and move them around with the intent on eating either seeds or vegetables. The bird has the ability to eat seed tiles, whereas the rabbit has the ability to eat vegetables. Next up, we have another 2-sided token that players can place on the board to give them special abilities. The one side is a sundial, and basically that allows a player to manipulate the dice for any action that involves coordinates, and I'll explain that in a minute. The other side is a scarecrow, and this has actually 2 different abilities. One, it protects any crops or seeds rather from being eaten by the bird. The second ability that this particular scarecrow has is that it awards that player bonus points for harvesting any crops around it. Over here on the right, we have 4 dice. Players will be rolling these every turn to determine what kind of actions they can perform. Above that, we have a set of different player markers here. They're called discs. And basically, players will be placing these discs on any seeds that they plant or any special tiles that they play on the board, just so that they can keep track of which tiles belong to what player. Lastly, you have these 4 gnome tiles along the top here, and these are optional. You don't have to include these in your game. These are additional components that were added as the result of the game reaching a particular stretch goal in their Kickstarter campaign. But just to sum these guys up, they help players manipulate the dice in a particular way. Setting up the game is pretty easy. The first thing that you want to do is place the 5 seed types into their own individual stacks. The number of tiles that you use per stack all depends on how many people are actually playing the game. After that, each player will receive the same thing. They'll each receive a bird and rabbit token. They'll receive one of these sun tokens. They'll also receive one of these sundial and scarecrow tokens, and a set of these colored discs of one color. Now, before I touch on the gameplay, I just want to take a quick look at the board and what's going on here. Along the outside of the board is a numbered track. This will serve as the score track throughout the entire game. At the beginning of the game, players will take one of their colored discs and place it at this gate, and as players earn points, they'll move this marker up this track. Further in, you've got dice along this side, along this column here, and you've got dice along this row, and they each number 1 through 6. You've got 1 through 6 going from left to right, and 1 through 6 going from top to bottom. This will serve as the coordinate system, and that plays a role in how a player performs a particular action in the game. Finally, the board itself is broken up into a 6x6 grid, and there are some stars in the bottom right hand corner of this grid that award players with bonus points should they happen to harvest crops at these locations. On a player's turn, there are a total of 3 different phases, and it's not all that complicated. In fact, if you look at the reference card, this is something I didn't show you during the components section of this video, but if you look at the reference card, it actually boils down what these 3 phases are. The first thing that you'll do is roll all 4 dice, and you may re-roll if they are all the same. The second phase is that you can spend dice to perform actions. You'll use all the dice if possible. And finally, the third phase, you'll pass the dice to the left. The game ends at the end of the turn on which the last seed is bought. Alright, so what does all that mean? Well, if you've ever played the game Alien Frontiers, you'll know that you'll be rolling dice in that game to perform actions with the intent on earning victory points. In fact, Garden Dice is very similar to that. You'll be rolling dice on your turn, and you'll be making use of these dice to perform actions. You can buy seeds, you can water seeds, you can harvest crops, you can move tiles around on the board, or place tiles on the board, different things like that. And your goal is going to be harvesting these crops in order to move your marker along the point track. And the person with the most points at the end of the game will win. With that said, let's just take a quick look at some of the actions that you can perform on your turn. And if you look at your handy-dandy reference card here, again, you'll receive this at the beginning of the game, you'll be rolling all 4 dice. And let's just assume that I rolled a 6, a 5, a 3, and a 1. After that, I can spend the dice to perform actions. And as you can see, there are a number of different actions here. Let's just take a quick look at the first one, buying a seed. Basically, you'll be giving up one of the dice that you've rolled to place a seed from the available stock into your inventory. Basically, the dice that you use has to be equal to or greater than the value of the seed that you're going for. So let's say that I gave up a 3 to buy a seed tile over here on the left. I would be able to buy either the 3, the 2, or the 1. However, had I used a 5 instead of the 3, I would be able to buy the 5, the 4, the 3, the 2, or the 1. Now with that said, let's just assume for the moment that I gave up a 3 to buy this 3 seed tile to place it into my personal stock. The next action I want to quickly go over is placing a seed from your inventory onto the board. You'll take 2 of the dice that you've rolled and place it somewhere on the board that matches the coordinates of the 2 dice that you gave up. So let's say that I want to place this tomato seed on the board. I could do, say, a combination like 5 and 6, and then I would take a look at the coordinate system on the rows and columns along the side here. And using these 2 dice, I could do 5, 6 here, or I could place it at 5, 6 here. So I'm just going to go ahead and give these 2 dice up and place this over here. Again, the dice I gave up was 5, 6, so I would have to place it at the 5, 6 coordinate here, or the 5, 6 coordinate located here. Now, once you place something onto the board, it's very important that you remember to place one of your markers onto that tile, just so that you can keep track of which tiles belong to you. Now, before I move on to the next action, I just want to quickly point out that the place a tile action is not limited to seeds in your inventory. You can actually use the coordinate system and the 2 dice to place special tiles. The Sundial / Scarecrow tile always starts out as the Sundial, and the Bird / Rabbit tile or token always starts out on the bird side. The third action a player can perform is watering a seed tile. And all that involves is giving up one of the die that they've rolled to water a seed of equal or lower value. In this case, let's say it's green's turn. The only seed that they have is this 5 over here. If they want to water it, they'd have to give up the 5 die, as the 4, 3, and 1 aren't high enough to do so. To water it, they just simply put this aside, this 5 aside, and flip this seed over to the plant side. Now at this point, there's something that's called chaining that occurs. Any tiles that are adjacent to the original tile that are a lower value than it will go ahead and also be watered. You've got a 4 sitting here, which is lower than the 5, so the 4 would also be watered. Even though it belongs to the blue player, it doesn't matter. The chaining will still occur. Now at that point, chaining will occur from that tile. In this case, there is a 3 right next to the 4. So the 4 will chain to 3, and this tile will also be watered. Once all of the tiles have been watered, then that particular action is over. The next action, harvesting a veggie, is actually done roughly the same way. They'll give up a die of equal or greater value than the plant that they're trying to harvest. In this case, let's say it's green's turn. They have a 6 and a 5 here. They could harvest this 5 over here by giving one of those up. So let's say that green gives up the 5 and harvests this 5. This would go into their score pile. Green would take this marker back and put it into their own little stock over here. And they'll keep that for the end game scoring. Now, chaining also occurs at this point. Any tiles that are adjacent to it are also harvested. Now, the person that did the harvesting will gain bonus points for harvesting enemy tiles. In this case, the 4 is lower than the 5, so the blue player would earn that and take that back, and that would also chain to 3, so the 3 would also be harvested and be placed into the blue player's score pile for endgame scoring. Once players are done harvesting, what they'll go ahead and do is move their marker up the point track appropriate to the number listed at the top left of the tile. In this case, it was green that harvested the 5, so green would move up by 5, and the 3 and the 4 were harvested. Even though they were harvested by green, they were blue's crops. So the 3 and the 4, blue would move up by 7. Now, because green harvested blue's crops, he would gain 1 bonus point per tile. So in that case, green would move up by 2 points. The next few actions involve these critters, either the bird or the rabbit, depending on what side you have it flipped to. Again, these critters always start on the bird side first. A player can spend a 6 if they want to, on their turn, to flip a special tile over to the other side. Another action that they can perform is spend a die to move it a certain number of spaces. In this case, red has this bird here, and birds can eat seeds. So this player could spend a 2 that they've rolled and move it either over here on top of this orange seed or over here on top of this red seed. Now, this scarecrow over here is protecting this seed, so red would not be able to eat that seed. However, that red one up there, this red tomato seed, is fair game. So if red were to spend a 2, red could move the bird up here like so. And red would have 2 options. Red could either eat the seed whole and eliminate it from the game completely, in which case both the marker and the seed are just simply removed. Red would go ahead and add another marker to his bird. Or red could go ahead and claim the seed as his own by spending a die of equal or greater value. In this case, that is valued at a 3, and he could give up a 3 die if he wanted to and place the marker there, as if he had bought the tile himself. If a player is very active with their critter and eating seeds, they're eventually going to accumulate a lot of markers. Now, in order to get rid of them, a player can attempt to recall their critter and place it back into their available stock. And to do that, a player will need to spend a 6, and then also 2 other dice that correspond with the coordinates of its current location. In this case, it's at coordinates 4, 3. So the player would need to spend a 4 and a 3 on their dice along with this 6, and red could then go ahead and place the bird back into their inventory along with their markers that they've accumulated. Now the game ends when a person buys the last seed tile from the available stock and ends their turn. At this point, players will go ahead and organize the crops that they've harvested like so into rows and columns, and that's where bonus points can be accumulated. Players earn 15 points for each complete set going across. In this case, there's only one complete set, so this player would earn 15 points going across. Had this player had another tomato down here, this player could have potentially earned 30 points. Now, players also earn points for having 3, 4, or 5 crops of the same type. If a player has 3 of the same type, they earn 10 points, 4 of the same type is 15, and 5 of the same type is 20. Once players have figured how many bonus points they'd earn from that, they'd also factor in this sun token. If they didn't use it through the entire game, they earn an additional 5 points. Now, for every seed tile that they still have unplanted in their inventory, they lose 5 points except for the very first one. So in this case, this player has 2 unused seed tiles. The first one wouldn't count, but the second one would. So this player would lose 5 points for having this one still in their inventory. Once players are done factoring in their bonus points, they'll go ahead and move their marker up the score track. And the person with the most points at the end of the game wins. And there you have it. This is just a very quick look at the game Garden Dice. I didn't cover all of the rules found in the manual. For example, I didn't cover the specific rules for the Scarecrow as far as bonus points are concerned, and so on and so forth. You can check out a more detailed look at the game via my review at www.dadsgamingaddiction.com, or you can simply click on the link in the below description. That'll take you there as well. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.